now, and
The alert will come in, will pop you in a few seconds. Right now. Hello, everybody. Hello, boys and girls. How are you? This is Alejandro Castillo, broadcasting from Mexico City, the largest city in the world, by far, I think. This is Thursday, July 19th of 2020, and this is the show number 73. 73 very important guests we have had, and today is no exception. We have here a great volleyball personality that I know her for a long time, but it's the first time we met in Zoom. So it's a great honor for me to introduce you, great Lori Okimura. How are Lori?
hi,
How are you?
hi.
How's
I'm
everything in Los
great.
Angeles?
Everything is fine. Yeah, we are sheltering in place or staying self-isolated, but there are worse places to be right now during a pandemic. LA is doing okay. Well, they're spiking a little bit, but but I'm doing okay.
Are the beaches still closed or not?
The beaches have been opening and closing. It kind of depends where you are in California, which is frustrating. You know, you could be in one city and the beaches will be closed, the parking lots might be closed, and then drive an hour north or an hour south, and it's a completely different, environment. But everyone's trying to do the best they can. Exciting that the AVP will be having a kind of a limited, competition. Kind of keep the players safe and keep them, somewhat self-contained. But that'll be the first, live beach volleyball that pro beach volleyball that we'll have, and cross our fingers that everybody will do well and stay healthy. And yeah, but that's great that they're going to be coming back soon in LA.
Okay, so give me a minute because Danielle Scottarura is texting me. Yeah, she says she can't join the conversation. I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Yeah, some people are. I'm getting some text messages about that too.
Well, I will send you the direct link for the conversation, okay?
Okay.
I will text you in WhatsApp and in SMS so you can share it. All right,
Thanks
that's
for
it.
thanks for checking in, Danny.
Oh, thanks to Dennis Coterura, an historic Olympian for USA, right? Five Olympic Games.
Five-time Olympia, just amazing, and an amazing woman. I mean, regardless of her Olympic legendary status, just a terrific human being. So, yeah, thanks for watching, Danny.
Well, here's Lin Shu. Hello all. I figured out how to get here. Hi, Lori. Lori's and and Lin says also Lori is a volleyball icon. I do agree with that. Okay, well, thanks for being here, Lori. You are a personality that I really want to have here, and it's a pleasure that you accepted the invitation.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. Hopefully, we won't put too many people to sleep with my stories, but I'm
Don't say
probably
that.
I'm probably maybe of the 73, and it's amazing that you've had 73 guests so far in such a short amount of time. But I think of the 73 guests that you've had, I probably have the most bizarre background because I'm not a player, I'm not a coach, right? But I've been involved in the sport of volleyball my entire life. You know, I did play when I was little and up until college, and I still play every once in a while. People don't believe that, but it's true. Uh, but I've had, I jokingly say that by this time now, 31 years, I've been working in the sport. I've had almost every job, from making the volleyballs to volunteering at different events and running different events inside the US, outside the US, working with on the sponsor side for many years and on the event side for many years. So I think, I feel lucky, but at the same time, when you see one area or one subject matter, from so many different angles, you learn a lot, and you learn sometimes things that you wish you didn't know, and oftentimes you're in the room and you hear something and people don't realize, that you're there, or they, you're cleaning up after something and they don't, realize what's going on, and you witness a lot of historic things, and it gives you a different perspective, right, on whatever industry it is. For me, it happened to be volleyball and international sports, but for whatever interest you have, or whatever industry you work in, when you get the chance to see multiple sides, right, of that industry, it gives you, sometimes it's a cynical viewpoint, right, but it also is a real gift, right. You get to see something that you really love from multiple perspectives. So
Yes, I
yeah.
recognize you as a woman of volleyball, a woman of sports, a woman very um, believer of her causes, activist. So I really love what all the things you did.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, guess who's here? My Dominican brother, Dennis Perez. Regards from Denny to
Ah,
Lori, amazing
hi,
woman.
Denny. Hey, one of the greatest referees ever. Denny, give you a little shout out.
He was here. He was, if I can remember, the sixth or the seventh guest.
He was one of your first guests, sixth or seventh. That's great.
Yeah, it's great, great. A very good referee, a very good person. Now struggling a
Absolutely.
little in New York with this Corona, but
Yeah.
yeah. And well, talking about Corona, Lori, I think you are more shocked than I was yesterday to hear about the Stanford volleyball, the Stanford men's
Yeah.
volleyball program. They want to shut it down.
I tell you, the pandemic situation, that news yesterday, if anybody was still doubting that we are in the midst of an unprecedented, health situation, and it has an impact on every area of our lives, then yesterday's news that Stanford was eliminating, men's volleyball along with 10 other varsity sports. I mean, that's about as real as it gets, And first, I want to say that, Stanford volleyball, John Costi, Ken Shibuya, their entire staff, all of the kids that are there now, the student athletes, the alumni, that is a class program, right? And there are very few programs of any sport, I think, that um, can take pride in the type of student athletes that have come out of Stanford men's volleyball, right? I mean, they're icons of our sport. They're good people. They're contributors to society. I mean, this is not just about volleyball, right? I mean, that program and its discipline over the years with all the coaches. I mean, even going, Don Shaw is a very good friend of mine, and he had a good, a good handle or a good influence on the foundation of that program. But the student athletes and the people who have come from Stanford men's volleyball make it very difficult to accept that that this could be the end, right? I'm empathetic to the athletes, the student athletes, like the incoming student athletes. I'm sympathetic, to what they're going through. At the same time, from a business standpoint, I'm hoping that Stanford had a very good, thorough investigation as to why they did what they did. But also, I feel like this is a pretty difficult thing to accept. I just can't accept it at this point. I want to do whatever these guys need us to do to support them, to see if there's a way to solve the problem and maybe, help keep the program alive. You always want to find solutions. But, regardless, to support the staff, the student athletes, the support staff, and everybody, and the fans. I'm a Stanford volleyball fan. I didn't go to Stanford, but I spent some time as a teenager in the Bay Area. I went to school right down the road from Stanford University, and their men's and women's programs were my lifeline to watching quality volleyball in person and live, right? And I know there's a lot of kids and a lot of families who feel that same way. My heart's just breaking for them today.
What do you think is going to happen in the next few days or weeks?
It's I mean, obviously I'm not an employee of Stanford University. I don't know what's happening on the inside. I'm also not not on the inside of what is bound to be some very difficult um, heart-to-heart discussions, between the coaching staff and their student athletes. Like, what do you do, right? Um, I read the letter that was sent out. I read some of the press releases, talked to some of the athletes, past and present. Um, I think definitely the more information, there needs to be a little bit of a cooling off. This is tough news to accept, right? And so once the news has sunk in, I think there's probably a bit of a fact finding period. Like, what exactly does this mean, right? What does it mean practically speaking moving forward in the middle of a pandemic? Can there really be a season? Probably brings up more questions, I imagine, than answers. But that's why I think we have to let the people who are in the middle of the situation help guide where we go next. And when I say we, there's been an outpouring of support, and not just from people in the Stanford volleyball community, but then you expand that circle out into the general volleyball community and the worldwide. I mean, Stanford University and their men's volleyball program, their women's volleyball program, their beach volleyball program, this is a world recognized program, right? This is not just news in Palo Alto, California, or in the United States. This is major news for our sport, and as watching the timeline, as the news started to travel right around the world, I mean, the impact that it had on people learning about it in Europe or in Asia, was pretty significant. I would say as significant as, people learning about it here in the United States, right? But again, I think the best thing to do, there are a lot of petitions that are being circulated. I'm sure, a lot of conversations happening behind the scenes, not just with the team and the coaching staff and the university to figure out, what's next, right, step by step. But also, I think, the alumni have to have a very strong opinion about what's happening, and there are some iconic names in volleyball, that come from Stanford University. I mean, it's just, I don't think we've seen the end of it, right? I think it's up to everybody who loves volleyball to just pitch in where these guys need us to pitch in and help support, what they want to do next, whatever that may be.
Yeah, for example, the Shoji brothers.
Oh, I mean, come on, right? I mean, Olympic bronze medalists, like, when it's so rare that you have brothers or siblings, on an Olympic team, but also they were on a national championship team together. They are, I mean, I can tell you, I come from Hawaii, and you just begin to say the word shoji, and all the clouds clear, and it's volleyball royalty, right? But beyond that, I mean, the impact that athletes like the shojis, and many other athletes, even the current athletes that are on the team right now, the impact that these guys have had on inspiring other boys and young men to pursue competitive volleyball or even recreational volleyball, right? To just become a part of the volleyball community. I mean, it's almost immeasurable. I think, I think we haven't heard the last of, what people think about this decision. I think it's overwhelmingly, people feel like, I mean, this is just, how can this be, right? How can you take a program like men's volleyball, especially at a university like Stanford, and deem it unworthy of continuing, right? That's sort of how it's, being absorbed. It's definitely worthy of, continuing. These people put a lot of time and effort into building a class program and and running it in a very, very upstanding way. And there has to be some reward for that.
Yesterday was a Black Wednesday for volleyball.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I don't, although I'll say this, with 2020 so far, it was supposed to be, a pretty big year, I think, for a lot of people. And my bingo cards are full. I don't even know what to expect next, right? I think I'm of the mindset now that anything can happen, right? And anything is possible. And yeah, we just have to be ready for everything. I mean, who knew we'd be in the middle of a pandemic in an Olympic year, and trying to finish Olympic qualifying when we can't even travel to each other's countries and continents. And I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. And what do you think that sadly, do you think this sadly could be the start of something else with another programs?
sorry, how do you, so that's,
Do you think this news from Stanford could
oh,
start for another news in another programs?
yeah, I've been following very closely what has been happening with the conferences with other sports outside of volleyball. I mean, surprise, I love volleyball, but it's not been the thing that's been on my plate for the last year or so. And you have to kind of look at the return to sport, right? How are we going to do that safely? How are we going to do that practically speaking when there are, again, travel bans and limited resources, in terms of finances and whatever. I do feel like Stanford being a university from a Power Five conference and making such a huge decision, big announcement. I do feel personally that that might be the first of I don't know how many, but it might be the first, in a line of other universities that are having to make these tough decisions, as well. And it's not that I'm not sympathetic to the other sports, the other 10 sports that were cut in the example of Stanford. But I just feel, knowing as much as I know about, what Stanford volleyball in general means to the volleyball community worldwide, that's a big crushing blow, that it seems, I'm not sure that at some point someone's going to look back in a year or two if this decision stands and think, yeah, that was a big mistake. That might have been a big mistake. But I do feel, to answer your question, I do think, sadly, from what I'm seeing, and we can look at college football, as an example, I do think that there are going to be other announcements. There already have been, some announcements sport by sport. Certainly Stanford's was the largest that I've seen in terms of the number of sports and the impact. I think it was estimated $12 million, dollar financial impact, on their program. But we're already seeing it, conferences today, Big Ten, Pac-12 examining their options, whether it's modifying the schedules to be, conference only competitions. Anytime you eliminate competition from a schedule, that's one less opportunity for fans. It's one less opportunity for athletes to participate. It's one less opportunity for the jobs that go with, putting on a sporting event. But it's an uncertain time right now. There are no absolute facts or guarantees with what's happening in returning to sport. A very good friend of mine, Lisa Baird, is the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League. The Professional Women's League was the first to return to sport in the United States. And, they took what I felt was a very thorough, very, very planned approach, right, to isolating, self-isolating the teams and the players and, choosing a format that would allow them to control as much as possible, right, what would happen. But in a college environment, you're also dealing with, there's the general community in the college that you're in. It's really hard to shut down a university, especially when a lot of the campuses are in, major metropolitan cities, or even when they're in a smaller urban city or, suburban setting. It's in some cases like, everybody goes to the Nebraska volleyball, matches, or, the Oregon basketball matches or games. And so, I think I think we're going to see some other casualties, of the pandemic, right?
Oh, well,
Yeah,
let's be alert of that. And
absolutely.
I read yesterday that even Ivy League varsity teams are moving from fall sports to spring sports or something like that, right?
Right. I think what I read the release, it said they are discontinuing or postponing the fall sports season. And so not sure what exactly that's going to mean. I think it gives them a little bit more time to figure out, how to return to sports safely. It could mean that spring and fall sports, or winter, I guess that would be winter sports as well, mixed in there, might play in overlapping, schedules, right? They might play at the same time. I'm not sure that they've actually, said yet what this means. Are we postponing? Are we canceling? Will there be some modified, play, or I think it's smart to leave some options, because we don't know what we don't know right now.
Yes, of
There's too
course.
much uncertainty. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Daniel Scotterura is here, the five-time Olympian. She says, sorry, hey, Lori, and yes, it is hard to believe Stanford ended
I
their men's
know.
program.
It's heartbreaking. It really is unbelievable. I mean, there are very few things that surprise me anymore in our sport, and that definitely took me by surprise. Yeah, I had to had to read it twice, three times to make. Wait, does this what is this saying? What does this mean? Oh no, So, yeah, it is unfortunate.
And Miguel Angel Ramirez is here.
Oh,
He
so
says,
this is the part of volleyball that I love, right? People like
friends.
Miguel Ramirez, just I mean, iconic, referee, Olympic referee, my friend, one of the first people that I knew on the FIVB. I knew him even before I started working with the FIVB as a delegate. But this is the part of having every job in volleyball that that I like, right? You get to work with some really terrific people like Miguel.
Yeah, Miguel says, hello, Lori. Big hugs, my dear friend.
Big hugs back to you.
And he also says, hello, Alex. Yes, we are very, very good friends.
Yeah, Miguel's fantastic. I miss him on the tour. He retired a couple years ago. It's not been the same.
Yes. Well, he was a referee delegate, I think, 2 years ago in
Mhm.
Huntington Beach.
Right.
Right. Another Olympian, Tajiba Hanif Park, says, hi, Lori Okimura.
Oh, yeah, you need to have her on this. But she is amazing, amazing. I always admired her and in her playing career, but then I got to work with her. We both volunteered overlapping years on the board of USA Volleyball, and she's an amazing athlete advocate. She's an entrepreneur, super creative person, and she just happens to have 2 silver medals, so she also knows a little bit about volleyball.
I would love you to have her as a guest.
Yes, you should. I'm gonna make that happen. I'm gonna make that happen. You need
also, yes. Oh yes, thank you very much.
yeah.
And also Danielle could be a very honor.
Absolutely, they both need to be on here.
All right. Jorge Carbey, my longtime friend from Cuba, says, hello, Lori. Great person.
Oh, hi. It's good to see everybody. Well, it's good to hear everybody's on. Thanks for watching.
Gracias, Jorge Carbey. Saludos hasta donde estás. And well, Lori, let's talk about a little about your beginnings. I know that you were born in Hawaii. So,
Right.
did you start playing something? I don't know, if volleyball in Hawaii, or then you moved to Southern California. How was that time?
Right. So I did grow up in Hawaii. I was born on Oahu, raised on Maui, where I still live part of the year. It's I wish I could live there all of the year, but it was anybody born in Hawaii, raised in Hawaii will tell you it was a really special place to be raised. And um, living in the islands, we still don't have really professional sports teams. So you followed the teams that, were on the mainland, as we call it. My grandmother was a huge San Francisco 49ers fan, football. She loved football. That's how I learned. I mean, again, I think outside of volleyball, I think college football, professional football, baseball are some of my favorite sports to watch and play, and see being played. But when you're a kid growing up in Hawaii, you have a lot of time outdoors, right? You have a lot of friends running around the neighborhood to play with, and you've got these like amazing beaches. And so beach volleyball was actually something, but not in the sense that we know it now. It was more like, stringing up a string or a kind of a fishing net between 2 trees and just playing volleyball. And my grandma played volleyball for fun, and she played in school and in her middle school and such. But I mean, she was still playing well into her 80s, not every day, but, and was very sports minded, and so that's, I think, where I picked, most of my love of sports, came from her. My family, as a lot of Hawaii families do, had job opportunities, in California. So I had actually relocated twice when I was little to Northern California. I lived in the Bay Area, so it's so a little bit of my heart goes to Stanford because I went to high school right down the street from Stanford University, and like I said earlier, like that was my lifeblood to high level really world-class volleyball in my eyes back then. I mean, so growing up in Hawaii and Northern California, you can't be a Northern California kid without knowing something about volleyball. right? The first time I ever became a member of USA Volleyball was actually in the Northern California Volleyball Association, and their commissioner, Donna Donaghy, she's a longtime good friend of mine. And we were joking about it. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to look that up. What year was that? I'm like, oh, I don't want to tell you how old I am. But how I got exposed to, club volleyball world and sort of the more sophisticated, like organized volleyball was actually through John Dunning, former Stanford, women's volleyball head coach and legend. And Pacific. He was at Pacific. Actually, he wasn't even at Pacific at that time. He was at a small high school in the Bay Area. I think it was Fremont High School or Saratoga, Sunnyvale, somewhere around that area. And he, as a lot of high school coaches were doing at the time, he gave a free clinic to a bunch of, junior high school age kids, right? Smart move, right? Kids that are going to be in high school pretty soon. And my friends and I, classmates, we were little. I mean, we were probably 10, maybe 11 years old. And I had only played barefoot, between two trees and nothing organized. I didn't even know that you were supposed to rotate, because we only had two people when we played, like two on each side. Right. But that's how I got exposed to the club volleyball world and volleyball in a more organized, teachable sense, right? Academic sense, if you will. And I'll be forever grateful for that. That was a wonderful opportunity to get more involved.
Okay, and did you spend at what age did you move from Hawaii to Bay Area?
Twice. So the first time I was in elementary school. So I was probably about 7, maybe 6 years old, first or second grade, whatever you are at that age. And then we moved back to take care of my grandfather was dying. And so my mother scooped my sister and I up, and we moved back for a little bit and, took care of him on Maui. That's sort of a kind of a thing that my family does. We take care of each other. It's happened a couple times in my lifetime. My mother took care of my grandfather until he passed away. And then we moved back to Northern California just about, time for junior high school. And we kept going back and forth, just because of the situation. But I went to high school in Menlo Park, Atherton area. And so I was just a stone's throw from Palo Alto and Stanford campus. But it was, it was hard to have two homes, I guess, if you will, but the one thing that keeps you sort of like in the mix in both, when you're moving around a lot, like kids who have to move a lot, or if, if you move a lot, is even as adults, your common love of sport, right? I mean, if you have friends who play open gym and you move to a new city, I have a lot of friends, like they relocate, they move to a new city, and the first thing they do is like, hey, where's the open gym? Or, they find it, they go down to the beach and like, hey, I got next, right? And it's a way to, kind of assimilate to your surroundings. But as a kid, especially, it's a really good way to make friends, when you don't have anybody that you recognize, or that remembers you from when you lived there before. So that's always sort of been something in the back of my mind. But yeah, so that's what brought me to California. And from there, I had an interesting, situation. I thought I was going to be playing volleyball. I was ready to go to a school to play volleyball. And I had a really serious accident my senior year in high school, and the volleyball career decided to put itself on hold. and so a lot of people ask me, I think it's been long enough that they forget that I actually, do know how to play volleyball. I'm not some weirdo who just watches the game from the side. But I learned pretty quickly. I changed my mind about what school I was going to attend. I ended up going to USC to study business, to study journalism. In fact, I went there to study sports information. And the year that I got there, they killed the major. So I know a little bit about disappointment in that sense, but it opened up an opportunity for me to learn, in some other areas and get a little bit more focused on business. I had the honor of still being associated with the women's team at USC. Learned how to coach, be a better coach, learned how to organize. Back then they didn't have like directors of ops positions and, things of that nature. And so basically, the 2 or 3 people in the office did everything. It was a terrific opportunity for me to see how things work, right, from behind the scenes. It was an amazing opportunity to have literally a front row seat on the bench as to how a major Division I, program runs to be involved in an athletic department like USC, which has its, every athletic department has its highs and lows, right? Ups and downs and peaks and valleys. But USC athletics offered me a really hands-on opportunity. I was involved in game management. I was involved in even meeting teams for serve and pass, right? I mean, I would see people that I, would read about, right? And Volleyball Monthly magazine was my Bible, like John Hastings. Thank God for him and that magazine. That was the Bible. And when I would see these people, right, I'd be working with these people, having to let them into the gym. It's like, oh my God, and one of the people that I had kept in touch with, just sort of, because I had to order the balls, right? I had to order the equipment, and was Richard McCoy, Dick McCoy to most at Mikasa Sports in the United States. He was the president of Mikasa in the USA, and really sort of the creative mind behind a lot of the successful products and initiatives and philanthropy, really, that Mikasa had been involved in. And one of the by the time I got to know Richard McCoy, the FIVB and Mikasa had already shared a very, very long history together. And that was my introduction, to the FIVB, and I'm forever grateful for that opportunity. People like, Richard McCoy at Mikasa, Tim Tessalone, who's at USC, who's one of my dear friends and mentors. He's the, I guess, they've all got these fancy titles now, like Associate Athletic Director of Sports Information, and he even has an office named after him, which I think is so cool. I take every opportunity to visit him when I can and still check in. But, Tim, I was studying journalism and business, which is a weird combination. And when the sports information major went away, I was offered the chance to change it into a sports studies minor. Kind of a precursor to what sports marketing is, today, or these sports management majors and specialties. And Tim, there's a whole bunch of us, but I was an intern for him in the sports information office. And I'll tell you that was a full-time, it was like having a full-time job, but having somebody show you, the do's and don'ts and also give you some real responsibility. I mean, we had us interns, like we had some real responsibility. And for somebody in Tim's position, that's the gatekeeper for all of athletics, including a, legendary football program, whether you like them or hate them, it's a legendary football program, a legendary athletics department. And he has been the gatekeeper, for USC athletics in the media relations sense. Fantastic at what he does. He's been there over 40 years. He's turned from a boss to a mentor to a close friend. For somebody in his position to literally have hundreds of people who pass through his internships and are now in some pretty significant roles, within the sports world, within the media world. Some have not stayed in media, which is fine. Like myself, I didn't stay, in the media, area, but I use the tools that I learned from him every day. I've used them every day since I left, the university, since I graduated. So
that's great. You were in the right time and in the right place.
Absolutely. And he happens to be a really big beach volleyball fan too. So I love that. I'll repay the favors to him when I can.
Perfect. And how much time did you spend in Mikasa?
Let's see. That was really interesting. So I was there a total of 6 years. More when you consider I had been with them as a customer for a number of years, consultant for a few years. I continued to do a little bit of, Richard McCoy was a dear trusted friend, and so we kept a very good relationship after I left. I think back, and the day that I left Mikasa, that I quit. I hate to say that word quit, I felt like I quit on them, but the day that I left was one of the toughest days, because you never want to leave any unfinished business. And I sort of felt like I was, in a way, but there was an opportunity to get back into beach volleyball, and there definitely was unfinished business for me. in the beach volleyball world, and he was extremely supportive of that. I loved every minute that I spent working with him at Mikasa. It was one of the most challenging jobs. I've had a lot of jobs. It was one of the most challenging. Um, it was one of the most rewarding, right? And from it came, really, it's so corny, but it's lifelong relationships, right? And not just with people that I worked with, but people who were my customers, people who started as my customers, and then I went to work with and for, and even um, you know, players that I had in my club program uh, became part of an internship program that I started, with kind of the same, um, the same spirit that Tessalon's internship program at USC, is driven. It's like you want to help other people who want to get into the industry, because at some point, the more good people you can get into your industry, the better off your industry will be, right? And that's true of any industry and business. And so there were even some kids that I've known. I call them kids, but they're all turning 40, and so I feel very old. But there were these like terrific young women who were in our a club that I was part of in Southern California, and they were all playing volleyball at these Division I universities, and gosh, you put them together on an all-star team, and it's like the national team times 10, right? And they got the responsibility of running some of Mikasa's promotions, right, for their internship, and several of them went into marketing or some type of entrepreneurship and all that. And that's really kind of a great thing. Your volleyball people getting jobs and opportunities, then they can turn around and make opportunities for other people, right? I mean, you have to make an opportunity for yourself, and then you can turn around and make a better opportunity for someone else. So my beloved Mikasa girls, they know who they are. We still get together every once in a while, and they're fantastic. I can't say enough about the experience for me, as well as I hope the experience for them. You know.
Right, Lori. Thanks for sharing. Let's go with some comments.
Sure.
Mika
Oh,
Wagner,
hey.
Rocket Girl.
Yeah. Hey, you got to have Mika Wagner on this podcast as well. She's an amazing voice. Former national team member, played professionally in Italy, indoor and beach volleyball for over 20 years, and happens to be just like genius, inspired, creative designer, fashion designer. So yeah, that's another volleyball person who's made it big in another industry.
Great, perfect. I would love to have her here also.
Perfect. We'll make that happen too. I'm making a
I'm
list. I'm making a
yeah.
list of everybody we're going to get on your podcast.
No, I'm open to every volleyball personality I can have here, of course. Yukiya Yeriwaki, Bay Area. Yukiya Yeriwaki.
Oh, hey. Yeah. In fact, I owe him an appearance on his podcast. Jerry, I will get to you. I promise.
Haven Lorenzini sending you so much love and respect, Lori.
So this is the great part of living in so many different places. You get to meet so many awesome people. Haven Lorenzini, that you just, Michaelian, is actually a high school classmate of mine.
Really?
So yeah, I mean, the relationship building over the years, the ones that are important to you, you keep, right? And that's true of personal and business, right? And they're there to support you. She's not even a volleyball parent yet. She's a soccer parent. She's got a terrific young soccer player in her household, so she gets it.
Right. María del Sol Rodríguez says saludos. He's a friend of mine in Mexico. Saludos a María del Sol. A Solecito. Pierre Yonko, hi Lori.
Oh, hey. Okay, so again, I mean, I'm gonna like gush over everybody I've met. Pierre and I know each other. Gosh, I can't remember what year it was. It was like 2005 or 2006. I was working as an FIVB delegate in Montreal, and Pierre, I remember this because I've actually told this story a lot of times when I'm trying to break in new promoters or help, with new volunteers and such. Is that, gosh, Pierre and like all the people that worked with him were some of the, I mean, just the most amazing workers. They had pristine courts, you would just die to play on these courts, right? They were the nicest people. I mean, went out of their way. And it's those experiences that we had rain sideways, we had lightning, we had delay of game, we had about everything you could have. We had balls that were going, kind of out of shape, and we had all these different weird, things happening. Yet through it all, every time I looked over at Pierre and his court personnel, it's like, it was smiles. What else can we do to help you? When you're in the trenches with people like that, they become your lifelong friends. Absolutely 100% lifelong friends. So Pierre, he's in Canada. Thank you. Thank you very much for all those years. And you were definitely somebody who left a lasting impression on me too.
Pierre also says, Lori, the most awesome person I work with in the FIVB.
Ooh, that's a big compliment.
And World Paravolley sends hearts.
So hey, World Paravolley, I'm very proud to be a part of. We'll talk about that for a quick second. So sitting volleyball, and now an exciting new discipline called beach paravolley. It's 3-on-3 standing. The world of Paralympic sport was a world that I had only seen from afar. The late Mike Hewlett and John Kessler, who I know you've had on your podcast. They were the two people that introduced me to this whole world of disabled sport, and in particular, the different disciplines of volleyball being played under World Paravolley. Back then, there was a different organization, but now it's World Paravolley is the international federation of sitting volleyball, which is in the Paralympics, and we're crossing our fingers and hoping to make as good a case as we can to include beach paravolley in the upcoming Los Angeles, 2028 Paralympics. The United States is on the women's side is the reigning gold medalists from Rio. I think they won a medal in just about every Paralympics that they've competed in, but they were the first women's team to win a gold medal for USA Volleyball in Rio, and that's fantastic. And we think about how awesome all of the teams are in USA Volleyball's national team, roster, then that's a pretty big accomplishment. But thanks to Mike and John, I mean, this was back, I think, in the late 90s. Might have been right around the time I had started working, or almost was finished working at Mikasa and transitioning to some other opportunities. I became aware. They gratefully they shared with me all about. At that time, there was a standing disabled team, and so I sort of was fascinated by the pace of the game, the athleticism, the changes of the rules, the equipment, everything, right? And so just a few years ago, I had the opportunity through another friend, who originally was from the beach volleyball world, Barry Kusner, who is the president of World Paravolley, a terrific champion for all of volleyball, ran the Sydney 2000 Olympics, is a person well known to the beach volleyball community. He stepped in as the president of World Paravolley. He's been reappointed, thankfully. He's a terrific leader, really a selfless person when it comes to volunteering. For there's a lot of time. These are volunteer positions, right? These aren't paid positions, and so to treat it as professionally and to be as invested in sitting volleyball and now in beach paravolley as Barry and all of his leadership have been is pretty outstanding, and so I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm still learning, right? I'm still, you always learn, right? But I'm still learning the ins and outs, of the Paralympic world. But I see a lot of similarities with other areas of international sport, that I've worked in. And I also see some real uniqueness in things that people don't consider that Paralympic athletes, elite disabled athletes have to contend with. I've met some amazing people with these terrific, inspiring stories. And because of that, because of the work that I've been able to do with World Paravolley, and learning again, still, more and more, I've had this opportunity to get a little bit deeper into disabled sport. I was asked to join the board of an organization called Angel City Sports. They are based in Los Angeles. They run, this year we've gone virtual, but they run an annual games called the Angel City Games, which I think if we were not in a pandemic time with the types of athletes that they're serving, this is fast becoming the largest multi-sport games, athletics games in the United States for disabled athletes. Right? They're an amazing organization. Clayton Freck is the founder, and his wife Bahar. They are people that I met. I didn't know very well and for long, but we did a sitting volleyball clinic. Elliot Blake from USA Volleyball and a number of people from the U.S. national team, including the current assistant coach Tama Miyashiro, and Cassidy Lickman, who is currently on the board of USA Volleyball. She's the women's athlete representative. They were first to volunteer, among some others. Michael Brinkley, AJ Nally, they all volunteered to participate in this very first sitting volleyball clinic, right, for Angel City Sports. And because of their work on that clinic, and how fascinating it was, to me, it was unbelievably fascinating, meeting these young children, with their prosthetics and, getting out of their wheelchair to try sitting volleyball for the first time. It's like, yeah, this is unbelievable that they have an opportunity to participate. But it was more unbelievable to hear the parents talking, behind the scenes saying, I never thought my child would have the opportunity to play with other children, right? That's a powerful statement. So going back to like you and me, like we grew up playing volleyball, right? We grew up with volleyball in our blood. We just took for granted that you could grab your ball and run outside and gather a couple other friends, right, to play. But some of these kids that are disabled, or they're in different situations than we are, they don't have as easy a time, right, to find not just kids to play with or will play with them, but places that they can go and play safely, right? And with modified equipment, adaptive equipment, with supervision to help them if they need anything, but also with just a really open heart. And that's what I found with Angel City Sports. So I gladly joined their board. As soon as I was finished with USA Volleyball, which was last July, I accepted the offer to join that board. It's been fascinating. I met some amazing athletes from other sports. A young woman named Jackie, who has suffered some paralysis, for example, from a surgery that she had, and she had a stroke. She couldn't play soccer anymore because she wasn't so steady on her feet. And thankfully, she found a mentor from Angel City who is teaching her the javelin, standing javelin. I met a young man named Justin, who I was just fascinated when I saw him at last year's games, because he is a seated javelin thrower. And if you've never seen it before, Google it, right? The contraption that they have to, base themselves on, it caught my eye, and so I went to watch. And he was kind enough to take a minute. I mean, he was trying to qualify, I think he was trying to get some qualifying times for, Worlds, and he is a Paralympian, he's part of Team USA. Thankfully, he had some time, to explain to me what was going on. But to see, just the determination, same determination I see on every other athlete that's competing for a spot, right, on Team USA. But there are definitely some challenges. There are some unique, conditions, and there are some very unique stories. In Justin's case, he was not born with a physical disability. He was the victim of a drive-by shooting, and experienced paralysis. Which led him to, as a lot of athletes I'm learning, in the disabled sports world, it starts out maybe as a physical therapy, exposure, and turns into a real inspirational opportunity to try something new, right, and to contribute, right, to a team, to be back in a team environment. And I follow Justin. I've watched him throw and hit personal bests, and it's, I don't know anything about the javelin except what it looks like, but he's been really kind to teach me about it. So, just some examples of branching out of the volleyball space. But again, being embraced by the family at World Paravolley was a really great opportunity. It's going to continue to be a great opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to this next chapter serving, in that disabled sports world.
Well, thanks for sharing, Larry. It's very, very inspiring, his stories. And I know that sitting volleyball in USA has a permanent place, right, in Oklahoma? correct?
Yeah, so the national team training, I guess, we call it the National Team Training Center, but
Oh,
the
yeah.
University of Central Oklahoma
Central Oklahoma.
has had a great relationship with Bill Hammeter, who's the head coach of the women's team and also the director of USA Volleyball's program. Um, and they have an in-residence program in Oklahoma. In fact, they were scheduled to host the last World Paravolley Paralympic qualifier for men's teams. There were 7 teams that were, I mean, just 24 hours away from arriving in the United States before the travel ban back in early March. And then, of course, the beginning of the pandemic. So, there are several sports still in the Paralympic and the Olympic program that have not yet finished their qualification process. And our USA men are patiently waiting, for their opportunity. They have not yet qualified, but I have every confidence that, that they're ready, right? They're keeping on their toes, and they're, mentally, I think this is probably one of the bigger challenges, that they've had. But yeah, one more qualifier to go. The women's field is set. Canada earned the last berth to the Tokyo Paralympics whenever they should take place. So congratulations to Canada. They played really well, and they hosted the last women's qualifier up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Like I said, the USA men were set to host in Edmond, Oklahoma, and we'll cross our fingers and wait to see, when they're going to be able to step back on the court. Yeah, they're ready. They're all ready. But yeah, Germany, Kazakhstan, there were several countries involved in that last qualifier that were affected, and so we just have to to make sure to finish that process up and wait and see and be patient.
And also, the beach volleyball qualification is not over yet.
Right. So
Next year, 1 year from now, we will have in Mexico, Colima, Mexico, the Continental Cup, the last qualifier for beach volleyball. I hope to see you there, Lori.
Yes, yeah, I hope to be there. But it's so first of all, let me tell you that Mexico hosts fantastic World Tour events. I had the pleasure many years ago of overseeing an event in Acapulco, and it was just fantastic. It was funny because not too long ago I found a photo. We're in quarantine, right? So everyone's cleaning their hard drives and cleaning up their old files, and I found a photo from Rosarito Beach. So this must have been like 1999, I think.
Rosarito was in 2000.
Was it? Oh, was it 2000? Okay, so it's 2000.
Do you remember that I also upload a photo?
That's right. Yeah, that photo. Right. So you know what photo I'm talking about. So it's a photo of Todd Rogers and Dax Holdren.
Yes.
Getting their gold medals.
Yes.
At the podium, and a bunch of us were down there. Of course, we were all, I think, in different jobs back. We were all doing something different, back then. And I think that, if I remember correctly, that was their first win on the World Tour, although they had, been pretty successful on the AVP. But, that was kind of, I think, they're one of their first tastes of international, victory. And it was amazing. But that was, Rosarito. There've been terrific people working in Acapulco, different organizations. And of course, I am so envious of the Norseca Development Center that's in Tijuana, in Baja, right? I just,
Baja, yeah.
I mean, Sal Verdugo, he had a big hand in putting that together, and gosh, I mean, what a terrific facility, that is. But yes, Continental Cup in Mexico, be very exciting. So yes, beach volleyball, men and women, is also one of the small handful of Olympic sports that has still not finished qualification. And for those that just a kind of a quick hit, the qualification process for most sports, and this is true in beach volleyball, can sometimes be run by the International Federation. And so no matter what you think of that, that is the way it is. And because of that, you have athletes that are flying literally all over the world to compete, in the tournaments that either are, in the early stages of the 4-year Olympic quad, or in the qualification period, of the Olympic quad, which is what we were in when lovely coronavirus decided to join the party. So the beach season has been suspended for many months now.
For Norseca, is canceled for this year.
Right. And so, well, we call it a postponement for the World Tour, but basically the events have been canceled one by one. I will tell you that. So I'm still serving as a volunteer member on the FIVB's Beach Volleyball Commission. And I want to tell you that I'm so impressed by the way that the FIVB and especially the beach department, Yu Chao and his staff and Angelo Squeo, and Vicente Araujo, who's the president of our commission, they have had taken a really kind of a look ahead approach to this. We were talking about this situation long before it unfolded, the possibility of what happens if this pandemic gets worse, and this was, many, many months ago. And, how could this possibly, affect qualification? What will the athletes have to endure, or what do we need to know to help the athletes? As you may know already, some people know the FIVB has put together an assistance fund, a financial assistance fund well, in this case, I'll speak about the part for the beach volleyball athletes. It covers a number of circumstances, everything from training to medical issues. Some national federations, or many national federations, especially those that were subsidized by government funds, had to suspend all operations just immediately, just no notice, everything shuts down, especially those in Italy, and I'll tell you that being in the room, and we've had, at first they were weekly. I think our last meeting was in person, and that was right before quarantine in most countries, had hit in Europe. We've had weekly and now monthly Zoom calls or go-to meetings about these issues. Everything from preparing, helping to prepare documents for the IOC to consider if there needed to be any changes, to the qualification process. It's exhaustive work on behalf of the FIVB staff. And when I say exhaustive, it is round the clock, every time zone. They're staying awake at some point, 24 hours to try and figure out like what the world was prepared to do in terms of hosting events, which countries were going to be allowed to host, non-spectator or spectator events, which countries were going to be closed for travel. There were some, I think the one men's event that was able to happen, there were a couple of Italian teams I heard that possibly, and a Latvian team that were unable to travel, to the event for various reasons, whether it was travel situation or health, quarantine situation or something of that nature. The athlete representatives that participate in our calls are phenomenal. They bring a really important perspective, the athlete's voice, into the conversation. I'm glad that the FIVB is placing a lot of value on the athlete's voice right now in beach volleyball. I encourage the athletes to speak up more. Sometimes things happen and people are like, well, how'd that happen? And what? I didn't hear about that. Okay, well, you have athlete representatives, please use them, or just directly contact the FIVB and they can point you in the right direction. But the communication, the kind of the, a lot of people would look at it negatively, like a doomsday scenario, but these calls can be kind of depressing sometimes when you're trying to figure out what you can do and all you can come up with is what you can't do, and you realize that the balance of somebody's livelihood, these teams, is in your hands, right? And so I feel honored to have been a part of that process. I'm extremely grateful to the employee, the staff at the FIVB, all the employees, the leadership. The president has been making some regular messages, to the volleyball community. I think communication is extremely important during these times, right now. And I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that we can finish the beach volleyball, qualification process, that the athletes will continue to be safe. We've had a few reports of not active athletes, but some retired athletes who have been stricken with coronavirus, once, even two times. It's a real, it's a real threat, especially to the athletes. They are as exposed, right, as you can get when they're in this competitive, environment, right? So yeah, we will, we're not done. We have a lot of work left to do. We still have to qualify or finish the qualification for what will be July, 2021, the starter. I have to say also that the people in Japan, I happen to know the guys who are working on volleyball, beach volleyball, Kimishima-san and Fujino-san and all the people in Japan with 2020, they're doing a fantastic job. They've been ready, right? I mean, this has got to be so hard for them to, to be going into the summer thinking that this would have been the summer that they would all be, unrolling this plan that started, 6.5 years ago. But they are, they're detail oriented. The Japanese people as a whole are extremely invested in volleyball, beach volleyball, and excitingly now sitting volleyball, in other disciplines. This will be not the first Paralympics that they've hosted, but it's going to be the first time for a lot of teams, to play in Japan. I think they'll be pleasantly surprised at the warm welcome that they'll receive, the organization of the Japanese federations. And I'm heartbroken that it's not happening this year, but at the same time, I'm really trying to do everything that I can to support, whatever they need, right, to make it happen next year, next summer. And that goes for all the disciplines of volleyball.
Yes, of course. And just to finish about beach volleyball, Lori, I think one of the advantages of beach volleyball for a lot of small countries, they have the opportunity to go to the Olympics as a small country, like Costa Rica 4 years ago.
Right. Trinidad and Tobago,
Trinidad and Tobago. Oh,
yeah,
Vanuatu.
Yeah. Yes, I love Vanuatu. If I could move there and change my nationality, I would. It's, first of all, it's a beautiful place. But secondly, the women from Vanuatu and now the men are coming on board, as well. But the women, they've really set the standard. They were practicing with no equipment. They were practicing at one point with no balls. They have taken, some of the toughest conditions and have turned them into the greatest opportunities. I absolutely think they were robbed by not being in the 2016 Olympics, but they're ready, and I think Vanuatu, is a terrific example of what happens. The FIVB makes a lot of investment in developing countries, developing nations, but so do the local volleyball federations and local sponsors, and all the local sponsors in Vanuatu and the local federation and, everybody working on their behalf. They have turned this tiny island nation, into a beach volleyball powerhouse, and okay, the powerhouse is only a small, tiny group of people, but I mean, they're out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the ocean, and they are competing at the highest level, right, on the world stage. And I think if they had more sponsors, so everybody sign up for a sponsor, sponsorship for Vanuatu, if they had more financial support, even a little bit more financial support, they would be able to travel more, they would be able to compete more. And obviously, everybody who's a coach on this thread or in a player knows that the more you do that, the more reps you can take, the better you're going to get, right? So I think they're just, they're just on the cusp of really being in, kind of a model, right, for the smaller nations to have a pathway to the Olympic Games.
And that's a thing that Cristobal repeats a lot. Hey, you guys in the Caribbean islands, you have the opportunity to go to the Olympics.
Right.
With beach volleyball, it's only 2 players. It's more easy to get a 15 or 16 staff a team to the Olympics or to qualify.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at, it's not just about island nations either. There are, smaller landlocked countries or, other countries where there may not be as vibrant of a national Olympic committee or lots of, always see on the Olympics when the athletes march in, there's always that one country that has the flag bearer and like one guy behind him, and then that's it, right? And sometimes I feel bad for those countries, but then sometimes I'm like, wow, that's like a badge of honor. Like, of all the people that could be participating in any sport, like, that's you, right? You're representing the entire nation that you're coming from, and you're also having to carry the flag because you're the only guy on the team. But it's there's a lot of examples. Like Latvia is one example. They have tremendous beach volleyball prominence, right? Medals and championships, and they're actually the only country, one of the only countries right now that's actually officially qualified. There are countries that are qualified, right, for beach volleyball. They've got such a relatively small National Olympic Committee and even smaller, volleyball federation, yet, they're a powerhouse, I think. and they know how to leverage their sport, right?
Yeah, and these guys, Samuel loves of the Smerins, they are great
Right.
players.
They're great. I mean, great
Yeah,
personalities,
I
great,
love them.
great
Yes,
everything.
really.
Yeah. Great everything. But Tina, Tina Grodina from, well, I only know her because she's from USC, go Trojans. But, that partnership and they, they're qualified as well, and so I think um, for any federation, right, any country of any size, right, beach volleyball in particular is a really fantastic way, to get um, gender equity also, so you can put two teams together, a men's team, a women's team. In some countries they can't have women's teams, but okay, we'll talk about that another time. But and I look at the lessons I've learned over the last 30 years in working in beach volleyball, and I'm trying to apply that to what we're talking about now with beach para volley, because that is similar to beach volleyball being a pathway, for the Olympics. Beach para volley can become a very good pathway to the Paralympic Games. It's another opportunity to involve more athletes. It's a way to involve more women, which is to me quite important. I don't want to forget the men. I'm a huge fan of men's volleyball as well, but I see too many places, or have gone to too many places where the women are either not allowed to participate, or there aren't enough women to make a team. Well, in this case, you only have to find two. In para volley, you only have to find three, right? So I think that the beach sports side of our, the beach discipline side of our sport is a fantastic way, to create a new pathway, right? And it's exciting too, right? What better environment to watch our sport than, you're sitting out there on the beach, or in one of these fantastic tennis stadiums that turns into a beach for, a couple of days or a week. Yeah, it's a great opportunity ahead, for
Yeah,
the beach side.
for us in Mexico, it has been a great opportunity. Mexican teams were has been, sorry, in the Olympics since Atlanta, excepting London 2012. But
Right.
every quad, a Mexican team, sometimes the two, men and women,
Yep.
has gone to the Olympics, and that's great.
Viviana Candelas, dear friend. I mean, she really, she exemplifies, like, I mean, all the Mexican athletes, but, I've watched her career, someone who transitioned from, an indoor career to a beach career, back to an indoor career. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal, but it shows the versatility of, the athletes in volleyball in general, right? Not just, I mean, there have been plenty of examples of athletes who've gone from one discipline to the other, and I see a lot of that now. I'm noticing more and more a lot of that in the world para volley world. There are a lot of athletes who have been for like 4 or 5, 6 Paralympics. I think, God, that's astonishing. Like, that's amazing, right? To make it to one is incredible, but to be able to endure for, more than one, right, is phenomenal. I mean, we talked earlier about Danielle Scott. She, to me, is like, she's a superhero, right? I mean, giving back the way she does, and has always done, no matter how busy she's been, or how far she has to travel, 5 Olympic games, like that's astonishing, in the world of volleyball, yes, but in the whole Olympic world. I apologize, I don't remember the stat, but I mean, she's one of a small handful of Olympians that have made it to that many Olympic games, right? She's in a very, very esteemed company in terms of the number of athletes who've actually been able to perform at that high level. And I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think she could have gone a couple more, so I don't know, she's still got it, as they say. But yeah, I mean, that's a great part of our sport. You can play at any age, right? You can play at any level. You can play with as many people. I mean, I've seen volleyball, festivals where there's like 100 people on one side of this gigantic net, the big ball, the huge giant ball, 100 people on the other side. I mean, you can have fun playing volleyball anywhere, anytime, any place, right?
Yes. I think the other 5-time Olympian is also a volleyball player. This guy Sergei Tetyukin from Russia.
From Russia, right. And then I think there's some athletics or track, or there's a gymnast. There's a Russian gymnast, I think, who's
Yes,
been, I can't remember her name, but she's in her
I
mid
will.
40s, I think, and she's ready to, if she competes in
It's
Tokyo, I think it'll
Chusovitina.
be, I'm not sure, but I think I read that if she competes in Tokyo, it'll be her
Yes,
7th games,
yes,
I think.
yes. At
Well,
42 or
I definitely
43,
can't
something
endure
like
that.
that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
I can attend 7 Olympics. I don't think I could ever play in 7 Olympics.
Sergey Tetukin was the flag bearer for in Rio. He's a great personality in volleyball in
It's
Russia.
amazing. I mean, it's hard to be, to endure that long in a professional level, elite level sport like this. Your body takes a beating, right? I don't know how. I mean, the sacrifice to your schedule, your family life, your traveling to different countries every year to play professionally. None of our national team athletes yet can play professionally in the United States. Now, I'm hearing rumors that that's going to change, so I'm crossing my fingers for that. But really, I mean, we're talking about all of our, pro level athletes, including the athletes of the national team, have to go outside of the United States, to play professionally. And that's true for a lot of other countries as well. Cuban players that have to play in Europe, and European players that play in Japan, and Japanese players that play in, Europe. And so it's very much, I think, our sport. What I love so much about it is it's very much an international community, right?
Yes, of course. Lori, let's go with a few comments.
Sure.
Graciela Aronovich, one of the best
Oh,
volleyball professionals in the world. Dear friend, love you. Hugs from Brazil.
oh, so hey, listen, she is one of the pioneers in publishing, which you may not know. Graziella and her sisters were the publishers of the first Brazil, well, one of the first, if not the first and best Brazilian volleyball magazine, beach volleyball magazines, Volley de Praia. And that's how we met, in fact. Yeah, I used to work for the AVP Tour back in the day, and she and her sisters were covering the AVP and all of beach volleyball and the Olympics in '96, and amazing human being and a terrific advocate for beach volleyball, and a dear, dear friend. So again, those relationships, right?
Yes.
All over the world.
Another member of volleyball royalty, Leanne Sato. Okay, let's
Oh,
go. Much love, Lori.
hey! Well, see, she has to say that. She's family. So,
Well,
yeah, the Satos. Let's talk about the Satos for a minute, huh? I mean, we talked earlier about the Shojis
volleyball
and the
royalty.
incredible opportunity to play, for Kavika and Eric to play as brothers on an Olympic team. But how about the Satos, right? Gold medals, bronze medals, brothers coaching sisters, brothers coaching brothers. I can't say enough about the Satos, all of them. And there are some that don't often get talked about in the same conversations as the national teams. But every Sato has played a role, including their parents, right? Have played a role in the advancement of volleyball, the betterment of volleyball. I mean, literally from behind the scenes, on the court, as coaches, as referees, as scorers, as as everything, right? And now there's the whole new generation of Satos that that are making their mark, and it's pretty phenomenal. I mean, you think about it, Gary Sato, coaching as many. I love the story. Every time I go to Japan, people ask me if I know Gary Sato. Sato-san, Sato-san, and I mean, he's a freaking rock star in Japan, and just before he took over the Japanese program. He was the first non-Japanese national, to head up the volleyball program for the federation. And there was so much excitement, because people, and he has fans, in Japan. And I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I was kind of shocked. I'm like, Gary, you have fans in Japan? Like, this is crazy, right? Like little keychains with his, I think I have one around here somewhere, little keychains with his face on it. I mean,
Oh, really?
I spent an hour once feeding all this yen into a little bubble, vending machine at the stadium, because I walked by and I had to do a double take. I'm like, no way. And there was little Gary Sato, a little keychain. If
Really?
I have an extra one, I'll send you one. But I know he has them, because once somebody gave me a box of like 1,000 that I had to bring home for him once on an airplane, and I had to hand carry them. They were heavy, but people were just fascinated, because the memory that they had of Gary was when he was an assistant coach for the national team in the '80s to Marv Dunphy, right? Legend. I mean, amazing human being, but just legend. And Marv was unable to coach. His daughter was being born, and he was unable to coach the team during the World Cup. I mean, tiny little tournament, the World Cup, And so he sent Gary with marching orders and instructions. And back then you have to think, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't smartphone, you didn't have an iPhone to communicate in real time. There were no fancy, headsets to communicate with your staff on the, in the technical area. And so I think it was Gary telling me it was like phone calls and I don't know, carrier pigeon or, whatever, going back and forth every night. And, that not only was that a legendary team, right? It's Karch and Timmons, and I mean, just, unbelievable talent, but also, Gary took that on as a head coach for those, matches. And, you all remember like the US won the World Cup. That was the first time that they had won it.
Right.
85, Gary was named the most valuable coach. John Speraw took the team in 2015 and they won again, it was what, all those years later. And Speraw and his team, qualified back then in 2015, the World Cup was still a qualifier, right, for the indoor Olympics. And that was, I was there watching like just, I think I was in this yelling match with the Russian Federation. There was just like one of me in the USA section and like all these other Russians in the delegation in the, in the delegate box. And it was insane, to watch it happen. But imagine that, back in 1985 and sort of like the beginning of this, kind of like era of success, right, internationally. But let's talk about the Satos. That's incredible, right?
And
Eric and Leanne and oh my God, Glenn and Scott.
And who can forget the last serve of Eric Sato to win gold medal?
Eric Sato, my personal hero. Well, and this is what I love about our sport. So Eric Sato, for all that he did to put volleyball on the map as a player, right, is quietly and very humbly doing even more, to give back as a coach, using his time to help at the high school, at the club level, just like, oh my God, right? The fact that we have athletes like that, right? Like Danielle, like Eric, like Leanne, who herself is a high school coach, their brother Glenn coached a national championship with Jim McLaughlin at USC, right? The coaching runs through their blood. Gary Sato right now is coaching in college again. Had some other assignments with Pepperdine and UC Santa Barbara and is coaching again now with USC with Jeff Nygaard. The give back part of our volleyball community, I think, is best embodied in people like the Satos. Their whole family has contributed to, to the betterment of our sport and other families like them as well. But, it's pretty cool. So yeah, when people ask me in Japan if I know Gary Sato, I'm like, you bet I do. I will say that very loud and proud.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lori, for the stories. Joe Campbell, great job, Lori. I love the shirt. Wishing you all the best.
Oh, so hey, that's my boss. So Joe Campbell is the another person I'm going to make sure you get on this podcast. Is the president of Paravolley Pan America Zone, which includes the United States, obviously, all the way down to Brazil, South America. We've welcomed Argentina recently, Laura Cametto. I don't know if you're on here, but hello. And Joe, I talk about a selfless volleyball volunteer, man, has been on, I think he's had more jobs than I've had in volleyball. That's possible. And is volunteering a lot of his time now in he calls it retirement, but I think he's busier than ever in his retirement, as also on the board of World Paravolley. And so he holds a very good position, within the world of Paralympic sport to help, give back.
Well, Joe Campbell also says, great to have you working with World Paravolley and Paravolley Pan America. Missing you.
Oh, I love work. I call him my boss affectionately because he's really helped me get up to speed on everything in the world Paravolley world. We like, sometimes I think as volleyball people, we step into these situations like, oh, I've been to a match before, I've been to this, and then you walk into this world, of sitting volleyball. I'm fascinated by it. I'm like such a super fan of it, but you walk into the world of sitting volleyball or beach paravolley, and it's like, whoa, it's like you've never seen volleyball before because there's so much more that you're looking at. But I feel that way every time I walk into the gym. I love to watch the national teams compete. I used to have this, I don't think I call it a superstition, but I being a writer and being a former aspiring journalist, I like to write handwritten notes, right? And I used to write a little handwritten note to if I was on the trip. Sometimes it's hard to figure out who's going to go, right? You don't know till the last minute who's on the roster. But when I would travel, whether at the same time as the team or meet up with them, I would write a little handwritten note, to some of the athletes, which to me was, just a way to sit for a minute and be thoughtful and think about them and what they're going through, but also to let them know that, you know, all the people that are working behind the scenes are motivated and inspired to do so because of that, right? I mean, that's, you know, that's part of the reason why we get involved, you know. So yeah, I just I can't say enough about the national teams. They're great.
Right. Miguelito says, you are one of the people who most left me marked as a leader that I met in beach volleyball. Always the same friendly and knowledgeable, knowledgeable persona. I miss you.
Oh, that's such a nice thing to say. I miss you too. I need more people around me who will say that. No, I'm kidding. This is the
Okay.
best part of working in, you know, in the sport, right? All the friends you make around the world. Invaluable.
Saludos, Miguelito. Saludos, Mike. Yo también te estimo mucho. Lawrence home, fight on, Lori.
some college friends, I think, right? I actually see somebody I wanted to give a little shout out to, if it's okay, in the comments. So, you know, we talked about athletes, we talked about organizers a little bit, right? We talked about supporters and people behind the scenes. I think one of the things I love, you know, about volleyball is sort of the like camaraderie, the generational aspect of it, where you've got sponsors, you know, who have been involved, and you see, sometimes you see the same faces, sometimes you see new faces. But I just, you know, one of the companies that I grew up with in volleyball and beach volleyball in particular is John Paul Mitchell Systems. And I remember, you know, meeting the people from Paul Mitchell when I worked at the AVP, and this was a long time ago. I mean, I don't think I was out of college yet. You know, I'm sorry, this was 10 years ago. Now, just like yesterday, right? You know, but I having a little bit of a business, you know, education and background, you know, to me, it was fascinating to watch the investments that were being made, you know, in beach volleyball. One of the companies was the Miller Brewing Company, and its total investment in the AVP, which was the investment by Miller was I think maybe best described as a marketing advertising buy. You know, it was a promotional opportunity for them. They invested millions and millions of dollars. But in addition to companies like Miller back in the day, there were companies like Paul Mitchell, right, that have been there like literally from my first recollection of pro beach volleyball to just like recently. You know, they've been involved with the AVP in many different iterations of leadership and different conditions, you know, of the tour. They've been involved in grassroots beach volleyball. They've sponsored for years. They sponsored an indoor U.S. Open team that competed at the USA Volleyball, you know, Open Nationals. Team Paul Mitchell, right? A legendary. There have been some legendary Stanford men's volleyball players that competed on that team.
Lori, team Paul Mitchell even went to a World Club Championship.
They will.
You remember?
Oh, I don't. Do you remember what year?
Yes. Let me Google it, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay. But I'm telling you, Team Paul Mitchell's a dynasty. I mean, it's a dynasty, right? I mean, if we were still, you know, if we're still running world championships off of the U.S. Open format, I mean, they would be the like 52-time world champion, you know. And I always thought it was so cool, like Julie Solwald and Kalina Nordgarden. First of all, they're mother and daughter, you know, which, I mean, Julie's amazing. They look like sisters, but Kalina is someone that I've known literally since she was building sandcastles on the beach at 4-man tournaments. Her mom was a great sponsor, a great friend. Kalina is a terrific friend. Huge advocates for professional sport, for action sports, certainly for beach volleyball. And you talk about relationship building. I can think of very few companies that have built relationships like Paul Mitchell has built relationships, you know, and it's because they genuinely love the sport. You know?
I have here the information.
Okay, yeah. When did they do it?
World Championships in Doha in Qatar 2010.
2010, that wasn't that long ago. Yeah.
Yes, Paul Mitchell as the NORCECA representatives. The champions were Trentino Betlic, and the MVP, guess who was? Osmani Haltorena. Osmani.
Oh, that's great. Well, see, that's like, that's just the epitome of the community of volleyball, right? I mean, you may not hear from people for a while, but you pick up right where you left off. There are people that I don't know face to face, but I know because we communicate, whether it's over the internet or social media or text messaging or WhatsApp or, whatever. And anytime I've been able to run into people around the world, it's to me, it's fascinating to connect with those people that, oh yeah, I saw you in this press conference, or I saw you, running doing the DJ or the entertainment. I've met so many people that, you hear about or you see, or even people behind the scenes, like media people and journalists and, and bloggers and stuff. When you finally get to meet face to face, it's pretty, it's a pretty unique, special thing, right? And every once in a while, I'll come across, some like old mementos or memorabilia. I came across a bunch of Killer Loop hats the other day that were from the like 1993 Manhattan Beach Open or something, and they were all the hats that Karch didn't pick, like all the non-pink hats. I mean, he had one of every hat, but I think it's, I've heard him say several times that he just kind of felt the mojo with the pink hat, and I've got the yellow and the white and the purple hats that fell out of a box full of, AVP memorabilia from the 80s and 90s. And I think I burned all my uniforms from back then. But there's a lot of people that are in the same boat that I am. I still keep in touch with a lot of the old AVP crew from back in my time. There've been obviously lots of people that have worked for the tour since then. But again, like I really appreciated the people that I ran across and became friends with and relied on, because they looked out for each other. Right, help you kind of learn the ropes. And it's tough when you're younger than everyone else, and sometimes you're the only woman, in the room. Can be uncomfortable, So anytime anybody has helped ease that transition for me, I remember that. I make a mental note, and I remember that.
Right, thanks, Lori. Graciela Aronovich says, wherever Lori works, she did a great and loyal work environment.
Wait, I'm not able to read all these comments in real time, but thank you.
Nick Coburn says, fantastic to hear from you, Lori. Great job. Great to have you involved in World Paravolley.
Hey, the Aussies are going to take over the world pretty soon in volleyball. Craig Carraher doing a great job down there, and Nick and all the guys in Australia that are pushing paravolley especially. And Barry Kusner is Australian, so there's a little bit of a motivation there as well.
Missy McCoffret, what's up? Missy
Hey!
McCoffret.
See, she's got to say nice stuff about me because she's my best friend. So,
okay.
so she's a terrific club. Well, she was a fantastic All-American, high school All-American, and amazing athlete at USC. Comes from Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and just opened a facility, created a volleyball club a couple of years ago, Ultimate Performance Volleyball Club in Tulsa, and they just opened this like terrific, beautiful facility, which has definitely not gotten enough use because of the pandemic. But as soon as everything can open back up, yeah, it's going to really be a game changer in that area in Oklahoma.
Ivan Wirtz, hey Lori, how are you?
Hey, Evan. So Evan's father is the fantastic Eric Wirtz, pro beach volleyball superstar from back in the day. That was his nickname, the Rocket Squirrel or the Flying Squirrel or some kind of squirrel, but one of the nicest guys ever on tour. Incredibly deceptive in the way he could like win points and make you feel like you just run a marathon at the same time. So, hey, Evan, say hi to mom and dad.
Leanne Sato says, yeah. Glenn Sato coaches at USC National Championship team.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Kalena Northgarden. Hey, my girl, Kalena from Paul Mitchell here. Love hearing you talk volley. So happy to hear of your association with the Angel City Group. We work with them too.
Oh, see, Paul Mitchell, like getting it done, right? They work with everybody, and it's amazing. I use their products. I use their hair products. Have used them for years. I'm a customer too.
Right. Chris Makos. I still have a Miller Lite AVP patch.
Oh, that's because he was an OG, man. Makos has been around for a long time. Definitely part of the culture that is beach volleyball. Definitely.
And Kalena Norgarden, thank you for the shootout. Indoor and beach volleyball is in my blood because of John Paul Mitchell, and I am so grateful I brought you and me together.
Yes, I'd say I have known Kalina. I mean, she's now running up promotions and stuff for Paul Mitchell, but I've known her since her mom was in that position, and she used to play in the sand at the four-man Bud Light Bud four-man and four-woman tours, which a lot of the Satos played and coached on. So hey, full circle.
Travis Stevens, hi Lori from Yokosuka, Japan.
Oh, so hey, this is a good story. So talk about running into people that you don't know, but maybe find you on the internet or get to know you, from positions. When I was still volunteering with USA Volleyball, I got this really nice note from Travis Stevens, who is a teacher for Kinnick High School at the Yokosuka U.S. Naval Base in Japan. And the national team, the women's national team, was heading over there to play. And Travis just wondered, like, is there any chance we could get some of the athletes to detour? And unfortunately, we couldn't make that happen. So he got the booby prize. He got the runner up, and so I offered to go because I was fascinated, to meet the kids, and I always love to watch volleyball in other countries, just to see how it's done and such. And also, they're American kids tucked away on this U.S. naval base in Japan, right? How often do they get to talk volleyball and U.S. volleyball and everything else? And so Travis was so kind to invite me down to the base, and I spent the day watching one of their tournaments and meeting some of the players, including his daughter Emma, who's now a college volleyball player. Her college season's on hold right now, but it's going to resume at some point, and so she'll be back in California, San Marcos, to play her college career out. But Travis, during the shutdown, during the pandemic shutdown, obviously when you live on a naval base, you go to school on a naval base, the level of security is obviously a lot higher, right? Than those of us that are just sitting at home or, on the patio or, like getting our workouts in, like April Ross in her backyard. And so, these kids were really, kind of isolated, right? Like not very many options, to interact with other people or to even just get out of out of base housing or base quarters. So Travis, their teacher, for the last several weeks of school, put together these. I think he had titled it something like "Interesting Talks" or "Interesting People" or talks with interesting people or something, and had invited like a number of like really cool people, on to chat with the kids. And since Travis and I had met already, in the visit to the naval base, offered to come, and there was a lot of volleyball players, and he's also a coach, assistant coach of one of the teams. And so we say, hey, let's talk volleyball. Let's have a session. And it turned into 4 weeks of, they don't want to just hear from me. And so we thought, okay, well, why don't you guys ask some questions and let me know what you want to think about or talk about. And I'll think about some friends that I can bring on, to chat with you. You guys can ask whatever questions you want and, interact. And Chiako, she was knock it out of the park, hilarious, right? Talked about the national team, talked about Texas, gave some advice about recruiting, and then kindly said, well, if there was anything I didn't cover, please DM me on Instagram. And she told me she was answering Instagram messages for like 2 days, So, Triborn came on, Lindsey Berg came on, they each talked about a different area of volleyball, right? Lindsey talked, I think, less about her amazing career and more about what she's doing with the second career, her creativity. And she's got the Kurote project. She's doing a kind of a documentary series on some of the women of or all the women rather of the national team. She's already had some highlights come out and such, and she's been doing a kind of a sharing her voice campaign and kind of supporting the Black Lives Matter movement by allowing a lot of athletes to come on and share, on her platform, which is incredibly generous. Triborn, talked a lot, and obviously people have maybe seen the story, but he's had an immunodeficiency disease. He's immunocompromised in a time where we're in the middle of a pandemic. He is trying to secure his qualifying berth to his first ever Olympics. And I mean, that's just a whole lot of, things to manage, right, during these times. So anyway, Travis Stevens, I wish I had a teacher like that. when I was in high school, who actually cared about what I was going through during, these unprecedented times, and who put together some pretty cool, side opportunities, side activities for his students to enjoy. And it was a lot of fun to do. Yeah, I enjoyed meeting some of the kids, got to recognize a few of them, but it's remarkable what these kids go through, right? They're relocating. Some of them were doing virtual graduation. The last night that we spoke, just amazing stuff that they have to endure, and thank them all and their families for their service, right?
Lori, we have 20 minutes to go. I
Okay.
want to talk about the causes right now you're working in as an activist. What does it mean? What is the impact of this Black Lives Matter in the United States?
I think, it's possible that for the first time, or even the first time in a long time, um, people are starting to step outside of their comfort zone and speak up. We always hear the expression, like, if you see something, say something, but it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to do that, and it does come with consequences. I'm writing an article right now for the Arizona State University Global Sport Matters, Global Sport Institute, and it's about this experience that I had, and in interacting with some athletes, both Black athletes and minority athletes of color, over, and representing about a 25-year period in the sport of volleyball. And I've had to rewrite it a couple times because I keep thinking, I can't have to do this justice. But in a nutshell, without giving too much away, there was a moment, just after Ahmaud Arbery, um, his murderers, were arrested, and just as the video footage of George Floyd was being played, all over the world. And I'm sorry, but if you watch that video and are not affected by it, then you and I really have nothing to discuss. It's kind of how I feel about it, right? I mean, it's I never wanted on my bucket list to actually watch another human being die in front of, in front of the screen or in front of my face and whatnot. And so, I think it was a moment, a tipping point of sorts for a lot of athletes, of all colors, but particularly the African American community, and the athletes, professional, Olympic, elite, Paralympic, and whatnot. I think it was a moment that struck a chord because we were talking about a specific group of our, of our society, right? Global society that's dying in front of our eyes. And I know people have strong feelings one way or the other. To me, it's not really a political issue, right? It's a human rights issue, right? And I had an opportunity to have a conversation with some people that I hold in very high esteem, who have, lived their lives as Black athletes, as people of color in an athletic setting where there aren't very many other people that look like them, right? And it was upsetting for me in the sense that they felt like at first, nobody was listening to what they had to say, right? And to me, that's unbelievably inexcusable, right? And then I felt incredibly humbled and grateful that one of the people that they decided to reach out to was me, and I take that, I take that with a lot of responsibility, but also I'm very protective, sometimes overprotective, right, of the people that I hold close around me, right? And I have always, somebody asked me this question at the beginning of quarantine. Of course, we've had a lot of time to, to think, but somebody asked me a question. I was speaking on a panel, and somebody asked a question about what in my career did I think was the most meaningful or enjoyable or fun, the stuff that I enjoyed the most. And I had to really think about it, to be honest with you, because sometimes I'll just give the straight, oh, I loved it all. I just give I get sort of desensitized sometimes because I do a lot of speaking engagements, and then I forget. I'm like, yeah, nobody really needs to hear from me, right? So I better be careful, like, with my opportunities, like really make the most of it. But one of the things that I picked out very clearly after giving it some thought was in every area of my career and my life that I have had the pleasure and the privilege of enjoying up to this point, the common thread of what I've enjoyed the most is working with the athletes. And I think part of it is because I never got to fulfill my athletic, aspirations. But at the same time, um, being in the world of athletics and the world of sport has given me my entire career, right? Being able to be supported while trying to find a way to still make sports a part of my life, even when I couldn't physically participate anymore, medically. It's like that's sometimes you don't get to do that. You don't get to transition to that, and people take for granted that it doesn't just like things don't just happen where the athletes go out there and then everything works. Like there's an army of people, oftentimes 2-3 times more than the ones that are on the court, that are making it all happen, right, from start to finish. So taking that into consideration, like the advocacy part of my career, which I didn't really realize I was doing, has turned out to be the part that I value the most, right? The advocacy for athletes. So in this conversation that many conversations, that I've had, it was alarming to me that some of the friends that are my age, I'm going to be 50 this year, and some of the people, my friends I have that are my age, had some pretty life-altering experiences with racism as athletes, and especially as athletes, like even on the national team. Some of them didn't have as jarring experiences, but some have had some really, blatantly racist, completely unacceptable experiences. And that was maybe 25 years ago. And so I reached out to some of these friends, these trusted voices, right, and tried to put them all together in a room with some of the more contemporary and current athletes that I was hearing from. And organically, what happened is the younger athletes who were afraid to speak up or unsure if they could, it's not that they were afraid because they didn't want to, they were being very methodical about, oh, hold on a second. I'm not like an NBA player who makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Like if I screw this up, I'm going to have one opportunity to speak. And if I don't do it the right way, I could end up losing playing time. I could, lose my career. I could lose my sponsors. And then I'm going to, I don't know what I'm going to do, right, at this point. So it was more that, that they, I think, needed to hear from each other and from other voices that, yeah, you know what, we know that this goes on. We acknowledge, that happened to you, and that's terrible, and your voice matters because it does, but you're not the only one in the room. There are other people that can support you, right? There's a community that can support you. There are people that, the mindset, yes, in a lot of ways has changed now in terms of racism, but in a lot of ways with some people, it hasn't. I'm shocked to find, even in our own volleyball community, like examples of racism that are just right in front of your face. And there was a point in time I wasn't shocked by it because it happened so often. I think I just like tuned it out of my mind, but now I'm back to being completely appalled. So to listen to some voices from today's contemporary competitive world, and then hearing from some voices from 25 years ago and over the years and saying, hey, listen, that same thing happened to me too. And it was a moment for these younger athletes to say, well, why didn't you tell anybody? See something, if you see something, you got to say something. And it was encouraging in that way, because that's the way that they think, right? They're phenomenal in that way. It's like, hey, if somebody did you wrong, you need to say something about it, right? But then the plain and simple answer and the reality of the situation is there wasn't anybody to tell back then who would either believe you or help you or not discount you and say, hey, that didn't happen, or hey, that happens all the time, or what are you going to do about it, right? And so we're not, I feel like even in our sport, which is not a minority friendly sport at times, there aren't as many diverse faces in volleyball as there could be, right? But there is plenty of diversity nonetheless. I don't want to discount that there's no diversity. But it's, there are some challenges. Rachel Adams and I have been talking, communicating recently about how to change club volleyball, right? Because the dynamic of club volleyball in the United States is that it's a very upper income, expensive, endeavor, right? Some parents are, I get emails from parents a lot say, hey, I'm paying, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a year. I'm like, for club volleyball, right? So, we've been having a lot of conversation and communication about like, how do we change that? And what is it, what have been the challenges? And sometimes these conversations can be kind of depressing. I'll be honest with you, like they're, downright depressing because the answers don't seem so clear. And then sometimes, when you get the right voices in the room and you kind of pull off of each other's inspiration, you start to get some clarity, and it's tiny steps, right? It's small steps. Maybe it's not about creating a club that everyone can play for free, because right now that's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. But maybe it's more along the lines of, okay, how about some after school 1 hour 90-minute clinics that are free, open to all kids of all colors. And that's one of the reasons why for many years, I've been involved on many different levels, as a volunteer, as a activist, as even a board member in organizations that are endorsed by the what's now called the LA84 Foundation. And their president, Renata Simrel, who's just one of the most dynamic people I think I've ever met. She has spearheaded an initiative called Play Equity, right? And Play Equity is basically closing the gap between people who can afford to play sports, young kids in particular who have access to sports, and closing the gap with the young kids who don't. Whether it's physical access, no place to play, no safe place to play, whether it's economic access, I can't join a team because I can't afford the uniform, or I can't afford the bus fare to get to the, to the playground or wherever. All different sorts of things. The LA84 Foundation, how I first became aware of them, they were actually called something else. They were the Amateur Athletic Foundation, and they are a nonprofit association that was created out of the proceeds from the 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games. One of my mentors and somebody I consider, a very close friend, Anita DeFranz, was a longtime president of that organization. And when I was in college at USC, in the middle of, USC is a beautiful campus now, but it was pretty rough, back in the 80s. And Anita provided funding, and the AAF, now LA84, provided funding for a bunch of us to renovate some community centers that had been shut down because of gang violence or budget cuts and all different sorts of reasons, in some pretty rough neighborhoods. And we were allowed to rebuild beach volleyball courts, sand volleyball courts. Of course, they were nowhere near the beach, sand volleyball courts. And we're talking, digging out the pits and putting in, wooden posts because we couldn't afford, anything else, and raising money for it. And, obviously the foundation kicked in the majority of the expenses. But yeah, there were times where there was pretty questionable activity going on, around us as we were trying to build these sand volleyball courts. But it's volunteerism like that. Right. And in any sense, when you're giving of yourself or trying to understand, what other people are going through, that sometimes can shape your next step, right, your course. And so I've always tried to stay involved, sometimes more actively than others. I spent 16 years involved in the board with Kids in Sports, which was an organization that was helping to create programs in these communities, helping train community leaders to have self-sustaining leadership and all that. Loved my time doing that. I left that organization to join the board of USA Volleyball when the opportunity, came up, and was recruited to do that. One of my dear friends and someone I look up to quite a bit, Dane Blanton, 2000 Olympic gold medalist and now the head coach of USC Beach Volleyball, which I'm so proud. Representation matters, right? And but Dane Blanton, back in the day when he was just starting out, before the medals, before the U.S. championships, before all the accolades came by, Dane was one of the first to use his voice and use his position and help engage his sponsors to create opportunities for these young kids from areas of town that were pretty rough, to have an opportunity to see something different. And he used to call it Dane's Day at the Beach. He still has a lot of programs that he runs and he's involved with to inspire these kids to stay in school and academics. But back then, I thought Dane's Day at the Beach was one of the most clever, meaningful promotions, like by far. It was Dane basically and his sponsors providing the opportunity financially for busloads of kids, from inner city Los Angeles, because that's where we were all based at the time, to come out to the beach to enjoy a free clinic. Here's beach volleyball. I mean, hey, you're gonna, from this AVP pro, Dane Blanton and all his friends and partners and colleagues that, were generous enough to donate their time. For some of these kids, they got to ride on the bus, they got to play beach volleyball, they got to watch, after they were taught by Dane, they got to watch him play and like, oh my God, that's our coach, and they got lunch, they got, t-shirts and everything else. And for some of these kids, it didn't strike me until one of the first Dane's days had ended that some of these kids live less than 5 miles from the coastline and they'd never been to the beach. Just because, right? There was no access. There was no bus that went to the beach. There was no freeway back then that had a direct path, to the beach. There was no opportunity, right? And there was nobody who looked like them, who they could learn from, right? So representation matters. I don't know if I'd call it activism as much as I call it just giving back, right? I mean, to me, I've had these really interesting opportunities, and it comes at a cost. Speaking out comes at a cost for sure. There were several years ago that I met a woman. Her name is Daria Safai, and she lives in Belgium now, but she was originally from Iran. And I met her through indoor volleyball, through the World League at the time. And I kept hearing about this like dangerous protester and, this security risk and everything. And Daria was just the most lovely woman. And her peaceful protest was letting women into the stadiums. And I didn't understand at first what that meant, right? I just wasn't sure. So I asked her, I walked right up to her and she didn't look dangerous to me, and I walked right up to her and I asked her, hey, what's this all about? And the long and short of it is there had been a dual Iranian UK citizen, a woman, Gonche Ghavami, who was among a small group of women who tried to purchase tickets to the first FIVB World League match. It was a men's match between Italy and Iran, taking place in Tehran in the Azadi Stadium. And she tried to buy a ticket to attend. Unfortunately, and this was, I think, 2013 or 14, it was against the law for women local women and foreign women at the time, to actually enter the stadium for football, soccer, and volleyball, those stadiums and arenas, to physically watch their team, their home team. And Iran was like a world, I mean, they were in the top, at least the top 5 at the time, right? And they were a major factor in, in world volleyball, as was Italy and all the other, teams that were headed to play them in World League play, right? Everybody plays each other at their own, the format back then was everybody plays each other in their home country. And Daria enlightened me to the fact that just for the mere attempt to purchase the ticket, Gonche was jailed in like the most brutal Evin prison where they send the terrorists, and it's just like the maximum security prison for it was like over 180 days or so. And I just couldn't believe, here I am holding a ticket, much less a credential, as as somebody involved in my federation, and I'm a woman, and there were lots of women involved. We never thought twice about it because plenty of women get involved in volleyball. It's largely a woman's sport in a lot of countries. But here was a woman who was in jail, hunger strike, the whole gamut, just for simply trying to purchase a ticket to watch her team, her home country play. Completely inexcusable to me, and I spoke out a lot about it, and it definitely got me in some hot water, a lot of trouble. There were not a lot of people very happy about me speaking my mind about it. I was, as a woman, not allowed to be, a part of the delegation that went to Iran, from the United States. Obviously, with no diplomatic relations with Iran, it was entirely up to the State Department whether or not I was able to, to participate. And I would have, gone on my own, with the delegation, but as my own, person, own expense. But there were other women serving in the U.S. delegation who had legitimate official, roles and meaningful roles, right? There was our sports psychologist, there was a press officer, all both women. And in the end, it was not the ideal situation for anybody. I got a lot of hate mail. I still get every once in a while some pretty unbelievable, like the trolls, as they call them, right? Or the haters. Like, first of all, they need to learn how to spell. And second of all, like, don't don't talk to me about what, what you think I should or shouldn't be doing, right? Um, don't threaten my life because I would like to watch my team play, well, and I would like the other women to have their opportunity to watch their team play. I've kept in touch with Daria a lot over the years. We met up again at the Rio Olympics, where she was forcibly removed from the venue before then being allowed to, to enter and watch. She bought a ticket. Iran, as we all know, did quite well, in the games, and that was the first time she'd been able to watch them, in person, except for coming to the U.S. once, and buying a ticket. Right, it was a big deal to buy a ticket. Like we buy tickets all the time for sporting events. We take it for granted, right? But the mere action of purchasing the ticket herself for herself and then being able to sit in her seat was like something that they'd never thought was possible, right? So, I call it activism, call it, whatever you want. I'm not sorry for speaking out as much as it cost me. I'm on a lot of people's target list, I'm sure. I think, what was the quote from Churchill? Like, if you're making enemies, you're doing something right. I don't go out there looking to make any enemies, but I'm okay with the people who dislike me. I'm okay with the people who don't think I'm, the best person, or who've told me to my face, or mostly they tell you behind your back, right? That they hate you and you're not the best person, and we wish you would die. But hey, you know what? That comes with the commitment that you make when you decide you're going to volunteer at that level, when you decide that you're going to take it seriously and treat it professionally because you don't want to blow it, you don't want to mess it up. There are a lot of other topics that I've spoken out on. Sexual misconduct in sports, has been one that I'm still involved in to this day. I would encourage any of you who have not yet seen the Netflix documentary Athlete A. Maggie Nichols deserves a hell of a lot more than thanks and credit for being the first voice, albeit stifled, but being the first person brave enough to report what had happened to her and to do something about it. So yeah, I mean, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to keep doing it. And it's not to upset people. It's not to be political. I'm like one of the least political people that you might, I vote, I definitely vote, but I don't care who you vote for. I just, we can agree to disagree on almost anything except racism, except sexism, except abuse, and I put it out there, and I think I'm, pretty honest about it. So, hey, keep sending that hate mail because I don't read it.
Thanks for sharing, Lori. I really appreciate it. I really like the way you act, and I really respect you a lot. Trust me.
Oh, same here. Thank you for doing all of this and letting some of these voices tell their stories. I'm definitely gonna share with this podcast with others that I hope you'll have some time for, and the next 73 people.
Oh yes. Well, it's time. You told us. You told me just 2 hours.
Well, if you have a couple more questions, I can do a couple more. But
what's next for Lori in volleyball?
Oh gosh. Well, it's all international volleyball from here on out, and this is probably a good way to end. I am outside of the U.S. now, exclusively doing volleyball, trying to help still in places that, long before I had anything to do with USA volleyball as a volunteer, or, any volleyball in the United States. I had relationships, and my sort of education in volleyball came from outside the US, especially on the business side. And so I've returned there. I have a very strong affection for Japanese volleyball. I worked for a Japanese company. I'm part Japanese. I don't speak as well anymore as when I was 7 years old, but I'm trying to do what I can to help the friends that I have in Japan who are dedicated and invested in sport. Immediately, what would have been next for me is extremely honored to have been named as one of the technical delegates for the Paralympic Games in Tokyo. I would normally, not really find myself in that position. I take it very seriously. Do I think I deserve it? Absolutely not. I think I still have a lot to learn, and I'm trying to catch up and get up to speed as much as I can. But I also think there are areas that I have expertise in that are not the usual. They don't come with the usual candidates who do this job. Maybe they have different things that they're stronger at, and I have different things that I'm stronger at. So I'm just going to try to bring as much as I can, to the team. like I said, it's you know, special. I've worked a lot of Olympics as a supplier outside of the games, you know, with sponsors and federations and partners, you know, partners and such. But I think the only games I actually got to attend, and the many that I've been to and just be a fan, was London. And I took full advantage. You bet. I was that crazy person with the flags and the red, white, and blue, and like screaming for all the, you know, all the teams. It's hard for me because, you know, I have so many friends from other countries. Like, you know, I'm certainly loyal because of my nationality to American teams when they're playing, but I also have lots of friends from other countries that I want to see do well. So, you know, I'm very mindful of that. But it was hard to just be a fan, you know, because I'm used to just working or having, you know, having some responsibility and not really being able to soak in the fan side, you know, of the experience. Rio was a little bit different. You know, I went on my own, but I did have some responsibilities, you know, outside of just being a super fan. And but Tokyo will be different. You know, again, I've had my eye on the Japanese effort for quite some time. Have a lot of respect for the people that are involved in the games. I mentioned a few earlier, you know, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. The people I've watched kind of come up in the, you know, in Japanese volleyball, and I'm really proud to see them. I'm like just, you know, really excited to see them, you know, take the lead and you know, be the bosses now, right? Instead of the interns and the assistants. But that's really immediately, that's what's next. I will be stepping into some new opportunities that are more multi-sport oriented, which I can't really get into at this point, but and I'm really looking forward to you know, really rolling my sleeves up and you know, kind of contributing more, not only on the World Paravolley side, but specifically with Angel City Sports. You know, I'm really excited about that opportunity. I'm loving learning about like goal ball and wheelchair basketball, and you know, trying all these different you know, different sports. I'm completely inspired, you know, by the people I'm meeting. But I'm also, you know, I have a selfish motivation in that, you know, they adopted sitting volleyball to be part of their games. Obviously, they'll, you know, Angel City Sports has a very close relationship with the LA 2028 effort to bring the Olympics and Paralympics to Los Angeles. You know, they have a fantastic working relationship with a lot of the venues, UCLA, USC, you know, and you know, the city of Los Angeles. You know, current mayor is Eric Garcetti. In the city of Los Angeles, people like Renata Simrol at LA 84 with Play Equity, they have been really outstanding stewards, you know, of the grassroots effort for the games. There's $16 million a year of investment from the IOC into developmental sport, particularly youth sport. And LA 84 is right at the forefront, LA Parks and Rec and the city of Los Angeles. And we're gonna hope to get some disabled sport programs going. We've already had a couple of sitting volleyball clinics. Huge shout out to Camille from Angel City Sports, to Elaine Donald. Coming up with the games, we've got some national team athletes that are going to help us out, you know, with some clinics. Nikki and Laura from the women's team, and Nick. Oh gosh, who else is going to be on the men's side? Oh my gosh, I'm getting old. I can't remember who else is going to be on the men's side. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to come back to it. I'm sorry, because I asked him first, and now I can't remember his name. I know I can't remember who else I asked. But you know, but we're gonna have some really good opportunities, you know, to see these folks play, right? I mean, to you know, support our national teams, but also get the disabled athlete experience out a little bit further than, you know, where it's been able to be so far, right? And I just, you know, that's what's next for now. You know, it's as far as I've gotten so far, you know, and you know, and that's about, I guess that's about all that, you know, all that. John Kremer, I knew I would think about it. John Kremer, sorry, John, because I love you and you're one of the first people I thought about for that opportunity. But yeah, so they're going to be doing some clinics and such, and I'm excited to get more involved with the you know, the disabled sport aspect of what we're doing. No, okay. That's about it. It's about as far as I've gotten.
Last question, Lori. Which real Mexican food do you like the most? Because I have news for you. Oh. Chipotle and Taco Bell are not Mexican food.
No, I'm not a Chipotle person. And I don't think I've been to a Taco Bell in maybe like 10 years. I'm a tamale person. Ooh. Like, I love tamales. I mean, my brother-in-law his mother makes them, and every time they make them, it's like, okay, I need to have some here. I need to get a little bit of that. Yeah, I'm a total hands down tamales.
Well, in Colima, they make a very, very good tamales.
Oh, good to know. Something to look forward to. Definitely something to look forward to. And thank you, Mexico, for hosting the Continental Cup. It was yeah, wasn't looking too good with pandemic circumstances as far as being able to finish the qualification process. So Mexico is one of the countries that stepped forward in lots of ways. And so thank you very much to everybody in the Federation and everybody from the promoter and the local government and city that really made it happen. It's an important part of the qualification process. So
Yes,
thank
of
you for
course.
that. Yeah.
Hope to see you there, Lori.
Yes, same here. Same here. I'd be excited to make it all to make it all come full circle.
Okay, Lori, thanks again a lot. I think we can make a second part probably in the coming days. It was a very fun and entertaining, and a great talk with you. Thank you very much, Lori.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and I'm definitely going to send some more people your way.
Thanks a lot, Lori.
Great job with your podcast. Thank you for showcasing volleyball as well as you do.
Well, I say this a lot. The only people who are going to grow the game is the volleyball people.
Right,
Nobody else. We
right.
have to do this.
We
We
have
have
to
the
do it.
responsibility.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks everybody who tuned in.
See you, Lori. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.